The Aegean sun had turned my skin golden brown over the past 3 months, but it couldn't warm the cold knot of anxiety that lived permanently in my stomach. I wiped down the teak loungers surrounding the infinity pool for the 3rd time that morning, my hands moving on autopilot, while my mind churned through numbers that never added up. The scent of jasmine and salt air usually soothed me, but today even paradise felt suffocating. Mila, the Bungalow 17 guest, is asking for fresh towels, Andreas called from the service entrance, his voice carrying that particular strain I recognized. Important guest, demanding guest, the kind who could make or break our already precarious reputation. I nodded, gathering the thick Egyptian cotton towels we reserved for the premium suites. My fingers traced the embroidered logo of Villa Theros, my family's boutique resort clinging to the cliffs of Santorini. Each thread represented generations of work, of dreams, of sacrifice. Each thread was now threatened by debt collectors who called my uncle at all hours. The walk to Bungalow 17 took me past the main pool, where I caught my reflection in the blue-tiled water. 24 years old, and I looked like someone playing dress-up in hospitality professional clothes. My white linen shirt and tailored navy pants were spotless, but I knew the designer labels our wealthiest guests wore cost more than our monthly utilities. I'd learned to spot quality from years of serving it to others. The weight of real silk, the hand-stitching on custom shoes, the subtle sheen of platinum versus silver. Bungalow 17 occupied the most private corner of our property, perched on an outcropping with panoramic views of the caldera. The guest had checked in 3 days ago, and I'd noticed him immediately. Hard not to, really. Tall, dark-haired, moving through spaces like he owned them, which, given the nightly rate he was paying, he essentially did for the duration of his stay. I'd caught his eyes on me twice. Once while I was arranging fresh flowers in the main pavilion, bending to adjust a vase of bougainvillea. Once while I was testing the pool chemistry, leaning over the edge with my concentration focused on the pH strips. Both times, when I'd glanced up, his gaze had been direct, unapologetic, intense enough to make my pulse quicken. I'd looked back, let my eyes linger just a fraction too long, smiled with just a hint of challenge. It was harmless, I'd told myself. A small rebellion against the suffocating propriety of my position, the weight of family obligation, the monotony of each identical day in paradise. He was just another bored millionaire on vacation. They came and went like the tide. This one would too. I knocked on the bungalow door, professional smile in place. "Housekeeping with your fresh towels, sir." Silence. Then footsteps, deliberate and unhurried. The door opened, and there he stood, backlit by the brilliant afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. He wore black swim trunks and nothing else, water still beating on tanned skin over defined muscle. His dark hair was wet, slicked back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings, all strong angles and sharp intelligence in storm-gray eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice carrying an accent I couldn't quite place. Italian? Russian? Something that suggested expensive international schools and multiple passports. "You can leave them on the table." I stepped inside, hyper-aware of the intimate space. His scent filled the air, sandalwood and something darker, more complex. The bungalow was immaculate despite 3 days of occupancy. No scattered clothes, no half-finished drinks, no disorder. The bed was made with military precision. His laptop sat closed on the desk, a single leather portfolio beside it. As I set down the towels, I felt him watching me. That same intensity from before, but amplified by proximity and privacy. My pulse kicked up, a mixture of nervousness and something I didn't want to examine too closely. "You've been watching me," he said, matter of fact rather than accusatory. I turned, keeping my expression neutral, even as heat crept up my neck. "I'm attentive to all our guests' needs, sir." "That's not what I meant," He moved closer, and I registered the predatory grace in how he carried himself. This wasn't the lazy prowl of wealthy tourists. This was something else entirely. Coiled power, controlled danger. For 3 days, you've looked at me with those eyes, like you're issuing a challenge. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, but my voice came out breathier than intended. No? He stopped just inside my personal space, close enough that I could see water droplets sliding down his chest, trace the thin scar along his collarbone. Then let me be clear. If you tease me again with that look. He paused, letting the unfinished threat hang between us. I should have apologized. Should have backed away, remembered my place, my responsibilities. Instead, some reckless part of me, the part that was tired of being careful, of playing it safe, of shouldering burdens I never asked for, lifted my chin and met his gaze directly. Or what? The words escaped before I could stop them. Something flashed in his eyes. Not anger, something more dangerous. His hand came up, fingers tilting my face toward the light, thumb brushing my lower lip with deliberate slowness. Or I'll show you exactly what happens when you provoke someone who doesn't play by the rules you're used to. My breath caught. This close, I could see gold flecks in his gray eyes, could feel heat radiating from his skin. Every instinct screamed warning, but I couldn't seem to move, couldn't seem to want to move. What rules are those? I whispered. The ones that say wealthy guests are safe, predictable, harmless. His voice dropped lower, intimate and dark. I'm none of those things, Mila. The sound of my name on his lips sent electricity down my spine. How do you know my name? I make it my business to know things that interest me. His thumb traced my jawline now, a possessive gesture that should have offended me, but instead made my knees weak. And you, beautiful girl, playing at being a resort employee when you move through these grounds like you own them, have interested me from the moment I arrived. I do own them, I said, the words tumbling out. My family does. This is Villa Theros. Understanding flickered across his face. That explains it. Explains what? Why you look at me like you're not quite sure if I'm dangerous or just another entitled tourist. He stepped back slightly, giving me space to breathe. I'm both. And neither. But mostly, I'm someone you shouldn't be alone with when you look at me like that. I should have left. Should have grabbed the empty towel basket and fled to the safety of the service areas, where Andreas and the rest of the staff provided buffer and witness. Instead, I stood my ground, chin still raised, pulse racing with something that felt dangerously like excitement. Maybe I'm not as fragile as you think. His smile was slow, predatory, absolutely devastating. Oh, I don't think you're fragile at all. That's what makes this so interesting. He moved to the window, presenting his back to me, a gesture that somehow felt both dismissive and inviting. But you should know what you're playing with before you continue this game. What game? The one where you tease me with innocent looks and provocative smiles, thinking I'm just another guest who'll admire from a distance and leave a generous tip. He turned back, his expression serious now. I don't admire from a distance, Mila. When I want something, I take it. And I've wanted you since I saw you bending over those flowers, all professional composure hiding fire underneath. My heart hammered against my ribs. This conversation had veered so far from appropriate that I couldn't find the path back to safe territory. I should go. Yes, he agreed. You should. But you won't. He was right. I stood rooted to the spot, every rational thought drowned out by the magnetic pull of his presence. In the silence, I could hear the distant sound of waves against the cliffs, the whisper of wind through olive trees, the racing of my own pulse. What's your name? I finally asked. I can't keep calling you sir in my head. Damien. He said it simply, like it was just a name, like it didn't carry weight. And before you ask, no, I'm not here on vacation. Business then? Something like that. His gaze traveled over me, assessing but not objectifying. I'm considering an investment in the region. Your family's hotel caught my attention. Alarm bells rang in my head. We weren't for sale. Couldn't be, even if the debt was crushing us. Villa Theros isn't on the market. Everything's on the market at the right price. He said it casually, but something in his tone made me think of sharks circling. But that's not why I'm really here. Then why are you here? He smiled again, that dangerous curve of lips that made my stomach flip. I'm hiding from something, someone, an obligation I'm not ready to fulfill. His eyes locked with mine. Tell me, Mila of Villa Theros, what are you hiding from? The question hit too close to home. I was hiding from so many things. Debt collectors, my uncle's growing desperation, my own fear of failure, the weight of 3 generations of family legacy pressing down on my shoulders. But I wasn't about to confess any of that to a stranger, no matter how magnetic his pull. I should really go, I said again, this time managing to take a step toward the door. One more thing. His voice stopped me. Tonight, the private pool behind this bungalow. Midnight. It wasn't a question. I turned back. That's against policy. The pools close at 10. I own the bungalow for the week. The pool is part of it. He moved closer again, but maintained just enough distance to keep things from crossing a line. Come or don't. But if you come, stop pretending you don't know exactly what you're doing when you look at me like that. I left without answering, my hands shaking as I pulled the door closed behind me. The walk back to the main building felt surreal, like moving through water. My mind replayed every word, every gesture, every charged moment in that bungalow. Damien. Even his name felt dangerous on my tongue. I made it to the staff office before reality crashed down. What was I thinking? I was 24 years old with the weight of my family's legacy on my shoulders. We were drowning in debt that my uncle refused to explain, our reputation hanging by a thread, and I was flirting with a mysterious guest who radiated danger like heat. Everything okay with 17? Andreas asked, glancing up from the reservation system. Fine, I managed. Just needed fresh towels. But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. Because despite every reasonable objection my brain could muster, I knew with absolute certainty that I would be at that private pool at midnight. I spent the rest of the day in a fog of anticipation and dread, going through motions of checking in guests, coordinating with kitchen staff, reviewing the accounts that showed our steady decline into financial catastrophe. The numbers blurred. My uncle Stavros called twice, his voice tight with the strain of secrets he wouldn't share. I avoided his calls, unable to bear another cryptic conversation about temporary setbacks and necessary sacrifices. As sunset painted the caldera in shades of gold and rose, I stood on the terrace overlooking the water and thought about choice. About the difference between the life I was supposed to want, safe, predictable, rooted in tradition and obligation, and the reckless hunger stirring in my chest every time I thought about storm-gray eyes and dangerous smiles. Midnight approached like an inevitability. I changed out of my work clothes into a simple white sundress, telling myself I was just going for a walk. Just clearing my head. The private pool glowed turquoise in the darkness, lit from beneath the water. Damien stood at the far end, still shirtless, looking out over the black expanse of sea and sky. He turned as I approached, and the smile that curved his lips held both triumph and something softer. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. He closed the distance between us in 3 strides, and suddenly his hands were framing my face, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that stole my breath. Last chance to run, he whispered. Because if you stay, if you let me kiss you, I won't be one of those guests who tips generously and disappears. I'll be something much more complicated. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear my own voice. Maybe I want complicated. His kiss was anything but gentle. It was claiming, possessive, exactly as dangerous as his warning promised. I melted into it, into him, every careful boundary I'd constructed around myself dissolving in the heat of his mouth on mine. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "You have no idea what you've just started," he said. But as his hands tangled in my hair and pulled me back into another searing kiss, I thought maybe I did. Maybe I'd been starting it for 3 days, every time I let my gaze linger just a moment too long. The question was whether I had the courage to see it through to whatever dangerous, inevitable conclusion waited at the end. The morning after the pool found me moving through my duties in a daze. My lips still felt swollen from Damien's kisses, my skin still remembering the heat of his hands. I'd left his bungalow at 3 a.m, stumbling back to my small apartment above the main office with my dress wrinkled and my mind spinning. Now, serving breakfast on the main terrace, I felt his eyes on me before I saw him. He sat at a corner table, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian that sounded like orders rather than conversation. When our gazes met, he didn't smile. Just watched me with an intensity that made my hands shake as I poured coffee for the German couple at table 6. "That gentleman has been asking about you," Andreas murmured, appearing at my elbow with a tray of fresh pastries. His voice carried concern I didn't want to examine. "Says he wants to discuss a private dinner arrangement." My stomach flipped. "What kind of arrangement?" "He wants you to serve, just you, in his bungalow tonight." Andreas frowned. I told him we don't typically do private service for individual guests, but he was very insistent, said he'd pay triple rate. Of course he did. Because Damien didn't ask for things. He simply made offers people couldn't refuse. I glanced back at his table, but he'd already gone, his coffee barely touched, his phone call evidently more important than breakfast. The rest of the morning passed in mounting anxiety. I tried to lose myself in work, inventory of linens, coordination with the landscaping crew, review of next week's reservations that showed too many empty rooms. But my mind kept returning to the private pool, to the way Damien had backed me against the tiled edge and kissed me like he was claiming territory. "You have no idea what you've just started," he'd said. He was right. I didn't. At noon, a delivery arrived at the main office. A single white box, expensive matte finish, addressed to me. Andreas watched as I opened it, his expression growing more worried with each passing second. Inside lay a dress. Not just any dress. Emerald silk that caught the light like water, with a neckline that would bare my shoulders and a hem that would fall just above my knees. The kind of dress that cost more than my monthly salary. The kind that said exactly what kind of private dinner Damien had in mind. A card rested on top, heavy stock with a single line in bold handwriting. "Wear this tonight. 8 p.m. D." "Mila," Andreas started, his voice careful. "You don't have to do this. Whatever he's offering, it's not worth..." "It's fine." I cut him off, closing the box before he could see my hands trembling. "He's a guest. A very generous guest. It would be rude to refuse." But we both knew it had nothing to do with politeness and everything to do with the heat that had flared between us last night. Everything to do with the way Damien had looked at me like I was the only thing in the world worth seeing. I spent the afternoon trying to focus, failing miserably. Every task felt mechanical, my thoughts constantly drifting to tonight, to what wearing that dress meant, to what I was agreeing to by accepting it. At 7, I locked myself in my apartment bathroom and stared at my reflection. The girl looking back seemed younger than 24, her dark eyes too wide, her olive skin flushed with anticipation and fear in equal measure. I thought about my parents, gone 6 years now in a car accident that had left me and Uncle Stavros to run Villa Theros. They'd built this place with dreams of legacy, of family, of something lasting. What would they think of me now, preparing to have dinner with a dangerous stranger who made my pulse race and my common sense evaporate? The dress fit perfectly. Of course it did. Damien struck me as someone who paid attention to details, who noticed things others missed. I left my hair down in dark waves over bare shoulders, applied minimal makeup, slipped on simple sandals. Looking at myself in the full-length mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back, sophisticated, elegant, far removed from the resort employee in her sensible work clothes. The walk to Bungalow 17 felt longer than usual, each step an opportunity to turn back. But I didn't. I couldn't. Some magnetic force pulled me forward, made retreat impossible. Damien opened the door before I could knock, and the look that crossed his face when he saw me made my breath catch. Pure masculine appreciation, dark and unmistakable. "Beautiful," he said simply, stepping aside to let me enter. The bungalow had been transformed. Candles flickered on every surface, their warm light softening the modern lines of the space. The dining table overlooked the private pool and the caldera beyond, set for two with crystal and silver that definitely didn't come from our resort's inventory. Soft music played from hidden speakers, something classical I didn't recognize. "This seems like a lot of trouble for a simple dinner," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "Nothing about you is simple, Mila." He moved to pour wine, something red and undoubtedly expensive. "And I wanted you in an environment where we could talk, really talk, without you running away every time I get too close to something real." "I don't run away." His smile was knowing. "You've been running your whole life. From grief, from responsibility, from anything that might crack that careful control you maintain." He handed me the wine, his fingers brushing mine deliberately. I recognize it because I do the same thing. I took a sip, the wine rich and complex on my tongue. "You don't know anything about me." "I know more than you think." He gestured to the table, and we sat. "I know Villa Theros has been in your family for 3 generations. I know your parents died when you were 18, leaving you and your uncle to keep it running. I know you're drowning in debt that doesn't make sense given your occupancy rates and revenue." Ice slid down my spine. "How do you know that?" "Because I had you investigated." He said it calmly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "The moment you walked away from my bungalow yesterday with that defiant look in your eyes, I needed to know who you were. What you were." Anger flared, hot and sharp. "You had no right. I had every right." His voice hardened slightly. "I told you I don't play by the rules you're used to, Mila. I'm a cautious man. When I want something, I learn everything about it first. I'm not a thing to be acquired." "No, you're not." His gaze held mine, unflinching. "You're a woman carrying weight that isn't yours to carry alone. And I'm someone who might be able to help with that weight. If you let me." The food arrived then. Room service I recognized as coming from the resort's premium menu. Dishes I'd helped plan but rarely tasted. Damien must have ordered hours ago, planned this entire evening down to the last detail. We ate in tense silence for several minutes, the clink of silverware loud in the charged space between us. Finally, I set down my fork. "What do you want from me?" "Honesty, to start." He leaned back, wine glass balanced in long fingers. "Tell me about the debt. Tell me why a property as successful as Villa Theros is on the verge of foreclosure." "We're not," I started, then stopped. "Because we were." The calls my uncle received, the hushed conversations, the way he'd started drinking more, sleeping less. All signs of a crisis he refused to explain. I don't know the details. My uncle handles the finances. Your uncle is being blackmailed. Damien said it flatly, watching my reaction. Someone has leverage over him. Something from his past. Perhaps. Something he's willing to destroy his family's legacy to keep hidden. The room tilted. That's impossible. Stavros would never. Stavros is human, and humans do desperate things when threatened with exposure. Damien set down his glass. I can help you. I can make whatever's holding him disappear. But I need something from you in return. There it was, the transaction I'd sensed from the beginning. Nothing was free, especially not from men like Damien. What? 6 months? I need you to be my fiancé for 6 months. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. Your what? My family. He paused, choosing words carefully. My family has certain expectations. Traditional expectations about marriage, about alliances. They've arranged something I have no intention of honoring, but I need time to extract myself without causing a war. A war. I repeated the word slowly. What kind of family has wars over marriages? His smile was cold, the kind you don't want to know about. The kind that makes your uncle's blackmailer look like an amateur. He stood, moving to the window, his profile sharp against the dark sea beyond. I need someone who can play the part. Someone intelligent, beautiful, from a respectable family. Someone who has as much to lose as I do if this arrangement fails. My mind raced, trying to process. This is insane. You don't even know me. I know enough. You're loyal, resourceful, protective of what's yours. You don't fold under pressure. He turned back to face me. And there's chemistry between us that can't be faked. My family will believe it because it's real. Nothing about this is real, I protested, but my voice wavered. Because the attraction was real. The electricity crackling between us every time we were in the same room was real. Isn't it? He moved closer, crowding into my space deliberately. Tell me you don't think about last night. Tell me you didn't feel something shift when I kissed you. I couldn't. We both knew I couldn't. 6 months, he continued, his voice dropping to that intimate register that made my knees weak. You play my devoted fiancé, attend some events, meet my family, convince them this is legitimate. In exchange, I clear your debt, protect your uncle from whoever's threatening him, and ensure Villa Thero stays in your family for generations to come. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it absolutely was. And after 6 months? After 6 months, we stage a quiet breakup. You keep everything I've given you, the cleared debt, the protection, your family's legacy secured. We go our separate ways. I moved away from him, needing space to think. The terrace beckoned, and I stepped out into the night air, feeling it cool against my heated skin. Behind me, I heard Damien follow. Why me? I asked without turning. You could hire an actress, someone experienced in deception. Why a hotel owner from Santorini? Because you're not an actress. You're real. My family can smell fake from a mile away. His hand settled on my bare shoulder, warm and possessive. And because I want you, Mila. This arrangement gives me an excuse to have you, at least for a while. The honesty in his admission stole my breath. I turned to face him, searching his expression in the candlelight spilling from inside. What aren't you telling me? What makes this arrangement so dangerous that you need to warn me about wars and families? Something flickered in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or resignation. My name is Damien Ferrante. My family controls certain operations throughout Southern Europe, shipping, import-export, hospitality. He paused. And other enterprises that exist in gray areas of legality. The Mafia. He was talking about the Mafia. I should have run. Should have thanked him for dinner and fled back to my safe, complicated, debt-ridden life. Instead, I heard myself ask, and the arranged marriage? Joins two families, creates an alliance that strengthens both. His jaw tightened. The woman they've chosen is perfectly suitable. From the right background, raised to be a Mafia wife. She'll give me the appropriate image, the correct heirs, the strategic advantage my father wants. But you don't want her. I don't want to be another piece moved around a chessboard. His hands framed my face, thumbs stroking my cheekbones with devastating gentleness. I want to make my own choices. For once in my life, I want something that's mine because I chose it, not because it was expected or arranged. I understood that feeling more than I wanted to admit. My entire life had been shaped by expectation, taking over Villa Theros, maintaining family legacy, sacrificing personal dreams for collective responsibility. If I say yes, I started carefully. What would it involve, specifically? You'd move to my estate in Italy. We'd announce our engagement publicly. You'd attend family events at my side, play the role of devoted fiancé. He released my face but caught my hands instead. You'd share my bed. My pulse jumped. That wasn't part of the deal you outlined. It's a necessary part. My family will expect it. We'd need to maintain the appearance of a genuine relationship. His thumb traced circles on my wrist, right over my racing pulse. But I'm not a monster, Mila. I won't force you into anything you don't want. If you need time, I want you. I cut him off, the admission escaping before I could cage it. That's what terrifies me. I've known you 3 days, and I want you more than I've wanted anything. His smile was triumphant and tender at once. Then say yes. Let me solve your problems while you solve mine. 6 months. That's all I'm asking. And if I develop real feelings? If this becomes more than an arrangement? Then we'll deal with it when the time comes. He pulled me closer, until our bodies were flush, until I could feel his heart beating as fast as mine. But right now, all I need is your answer. I thought about Villa Theros crumbling under debt, about my uncle's haunted expression, about 3 generations of family legacy disappearing because I was too proud or too scared to accept help. And I thought about the heat between Damien and me, about the way he looked at me like I was worth fighting for. 6 months, I whispered. I'll do it. His kiss was answer and celebration, claiming and promise. When he lifted me into his arms and carried me toward the bedroom, I didn't protest, didn't run, didn't do any of the sensible things I should have done. Instead, I surrendered to the dangerous game I'd started 3 days ago, with provocative glances and teasing smiles. Surrendered to Damien Ferrante, and whatever consequences would follow. The morning sun streaming through unfamiliar windows woke me. For a disorienting moment, I didn't recognize the room. Too large, too luxurious, with views of the caldera that were somehow different from the ones I'd known my entire life. Then memory crashed back. Damien, the proposal, my acceptance, and everything that had followed. I turned to find his side of the bed empty, but still warm. The sound of water running indicated he was in the shower. I sat up, pulling the sheet around myself, my mind finally catching up to what I'd agreed to last night. 6 months as Damien Ferrante's fake fiancé. 6 months living in Italy with a man connected to organized crime. 6 months pretending to be in love while trying not to actually fall. The bathroom door opened, releasing a cloud of steam. Damien emerged with a towel wrapped around his hips, water still beating on his chest and shoulders. Seeing him in full daylight was different from last night's candlelit intensity. No less devastating, but somehow more real. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying warmth that seemed at odds with the calculating businessman who'd outlined our arrangement. "I ordered breakfast. Should arrive in 20 minutes. I nodded, suddenly shy in a way I hadn't been when his hands were on my skin hours ago. I should get back to my apartment. People will notice I'm missing. Let them notice. He crossed to the closet, pulling out clothes with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to being watched. Andreas already knows you're here. I had him clear your schedule for the day. Irritation flared. You can't just rearrange my life without asking. I can when it's part of our agreement. He pulled on dark slacks, then turned to face me. We need to establish some ground rules, Mila. Starting with the fact that from this moment forward, your schedule, your appearance, your public behavior, all of it reflects on me. On us. The casual possessiveness in his tone should have angered me more. Instead, it sent an unwelcome thrill down my spine. I haven't signed anything yet. We don't have a formal agreement. No? He moved to the desk, retrieving a leather portfolio I recognized from my first visit to his bungalow. Then let's fix that. What followed was the most surreal contract negotiation of my life. We sat on the terrace, breakfast spread before us, while Damien outlined terms in clinical detail. Villa Theros's debt, nearly 2 million euros apparently, would be cleared within the week. My uncle's blackmailer would be handled through means Damien didn't elaborate on. In exchange, I would relocate to his estate outside Florence, maintain the appearance of a committed relationship, and accompany him to all necessary family and social functions. What about Villa Theros? I asked, scanning the typed pages he'd produced. I can't just abandon it. You won't. Andreas is more than capable of managing day-to-day operations. I'll arrange for a financial advisor to ensure the property remains profitable. He sipped his coffee, watching me over the rim. You'll visit monthly to maintain presence. That's standard for engaged couples when one partner has business commitments elsewhere. It was all so calculated, so transactional. Yet beneath the business-like negotiation, I felt the pull of last night's passion, the memory of his hands and mouth making promises his words carefully avoided. Clause 7, I said, pointing to the paragraph about public appearances. It says I'm expected to participate in family gatherings and traditional events. What does that mean exactly? Something flickered across Damien's face. My family is traditional, old-world Italian. There will be Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, church events. You'll need to play the part of respectful future daughter-in-law. And your fiancé? The arranged one? What happens when we announce our engagement? Valentina De Santo. He said the name without emotion. Daughter of a powerful family allied with mine. She'll be disappointed, but ultimately pragmatic. These arrangements are business, not romance. I thought about a woman I'd never met, prepared to marry for alliance rather than love. Does she know about the arrangement? She knows it exists, not that I have any intention of honoring it. His jaw tightened. My father orchestrated this union years ago. I've been delaying, making excuses. You're my exit strategy. The clinical phrasing stung, even though I had no right to expect romantic declarations. This was business. I needed to remember that. How do we explain our whirlwind romance? People will be suspicious. We met in Santorini. I was immediately captivated. You were hesitant, but ultimately couldn't resist my considerable charm. His smile was self-deprecating. It's close enough to the truth to be believable. We spent the next hour refining details, adjusting language, ensuring both our interests were protected. Damien had thought of everything. Separate bank accounts, exit clauses, provisions for if either party wanted out, early. It should have reassured me. Instead, it made the whole arrangement feel more hollow. Finally, he pushed the contract across the table. Read it thoroughly. Take your time. I won't rush you into signing something you don't understand. I appreciated the consideration, though it didn't ease the surreal feeling of negotiating my own romantic arrangement. As I read, I became increasingly aware of what was missing. Any mention of emotional boundaries, of what happened if one of us developed real feelings, of how we'd handle the inevitable complications. "What about intimacy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Last night you said I'd share your bed. Is that requirement or expectation?" His expression softened. "It's a probability, given the chemistry between us. But I meant what I said. I won't force you into anything. If at any point you want your own room, your own space, you say the word. And if the attraction fades? If 6 months together kills whatever this is between us? Then we'll have learned something valuable about the difference between desire and sustainability." He reached across the table, covering my hand with his. "But I don't think it will fade, Mila. I think it's going to get more complicated, more intense. That's what concerns me." The honesty disarmed me. I turned my hand beneath his, lacing our fingers together. "Why does it concern you?" "Because this was supposed to be simple. A business arrangement with mutually beneficial outcomes." His thumb traced patterns on my palm. "But nothing about you feels simple, and I'm not sure I'm equipped to handle complicated right now." I understood what he wasn't saying, that his world was dangerous, that emotional entanglement was a liability, that caring about someone made them a target. Part of me wanted to reassure him. Another part wanted to run before I got in too deep. Instead, I picked up the pen he'd provided. "Where do I sign?" Something flashed in his eyes, triumph mixed with what might have been regret. He showed me where, watching as I signed my name to an agreement that would change everything. When it was done, he pulled me from my chair into his arms, kissing me with an intensity that had nothing to do with business arrangements and everything to do with the fire that had been building since our first glance across the pool. "No going back now," he murmured against my lips. "No going back," I agreed. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Damien made calls arranging for the debt clearance, speaking in rapid Italian to people I couldn't see. I watched him work, saw the authority in how he carried himself, the way people jumped to obey his slightest request. This was Damien Ferrante in his element. Powerful, commanding, exactly as dangerous as he'd warned. In the afternoon, a woman arrived with luggage I didn't recognize. "Your clothes from your apartment," Damien explained. "I had them collected while you were reading the contract." I should have been angry at the presumption. Instead, I felt the net closing around me. Not unpleasantly, but definitely irreversibly. Every hour made leaving harder, made the arrangement more real. That evening, we had dinner at the resort's main restaurant, our first public appearance as a couple. I felt every eye on us, heard the whispers as Damien held my chair, as his hand settled possessively on my lower back. Andreas watched from the kitchen entrance, his expression concerned. I tried to telegraph that I was okay, that this was my choice, but I wasn't sure I believed it myself. "They're wondering how the resort owner's niece ended up with a guest," Damien observed, cutting into his steak with precise movements. "Tomorrow they'll know. I'm making the announcement official." My stomach flipped. "Already? The longer we wait, the more suspicious it looks." His eyes met mine across the table. "Trust me, Mila, I've thought through every angle." Later, back in his bungalow, he showed me what he meant. A press release, carefully worded, announcing our engagement. Photos he'd apparently had taken of us during dinner. Candid shots that somehow made us look genuinely enamored. "When did you arrange this?" I demanded, holding up a particularly intimate image of him whispering in my ear. "I have people who handle such things." He came up behind me, arms circling my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. "In my world, perception is everything. We need to control the narrative before someone else does." I leaned back against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "Your world sounds exhausting." "It can be, but it has its compensations." His lips found the sensitive spot below my ear. Like you, for instance. I turned in his arms, searching his face. Is any of this real for you? Or am I just another piece on that chessboard you mentioned? He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, I don't know yet. Ask me again in 6 months. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was honest. I could work with honest. That night, as I lay in his arms listening to his breathing even into sleep, I thought about the path I'd chosen. 6 months ago, I'd been a simple resort owner, worried about occupancy rates and maintenance schedules. Now I was engaged to a Mafia prince, about to enter a world I didn't understand, gambling everything on a man I barely knew. The smart thing would be to wake him, tear up the contract, go back to my safe, predictable life. Instead, I nestled closer to his warmth and let sleep claim me. Dreams already filling with Italian villas and dangerous families, and the inevitable moment when this beautiful lie would have to become truth or end. The private jet that whisked us from Santorini to Florence was my first real glimpse into Damien's world. Leather seats that cost more than cars, a flight attendant who addressed him as Don Ferrante, champagne I recognized from the resort's most exclusive wine list. I'd served bottles like these to wealthy tourists. Now I was drinking it at 30,000 feet, while my fake fiancé reviewed contracts on his laptop, completely at ease in surroundings that made me feel like an imposter. Stop fidgeting, Damien said, without looking up from his screen. You look perfect. I glanced down at the ivory dress he'd had delivered that morning. Designer, tailored to fit as though made for me. Which it probably had been. Everything Damien did seemed to involve that level of precise planning. I'm not fidgeting. I'm processing. Now he did look up, a slight smile playing at his lips. Processing what? That 48 hours ago I was serving breakfast to tourists. Now I'm flying to Italy to pretend to be engaged to a man whose family name makes people nervous. I took another sip of champagne, needing the fortification. It's a lot. He closed his laptop and moved to sit beside me, his thigh pressing against mine in the confined space. Second thoughts? I should say yes. Should demand he turn the plane around. But the truth was more complicated. Not about helping my family, about whether I can pull this off convincingly. You already have. His hand found mine, fingers lacing through. At dinner last night, watching you charm the other guests, seeing you play the role of smitten fiancé, you were perfect, natural. Maybe because part of it isn't acting, I admitted before I could stop myself. Something heated in his gaze. Good, that makes it easier. The jet began its descent, and Damien pointed out the window. Below, Tuscany spread like a painting, rolling hills, cypress trees, terracotta roofs glowing in late afternoon sun. And there, perched on a hilltop, a massive stone villa that looked like it had witnessed centuries. Home, he said simply. Home. The word felt foreign applied to something so grand. Villa Theros was beautiful, but this was different. Old money, old power, the kind of legacy that crushed people who weren't strong enough to bear its weight. A car waited on the private airstrip, another sleek, expensive thing with windows tinted dark enough to hide secrets. The driver greeted Damien in Italian, then helped load our luggage. I caught fragments of their conversation, enough to understand they were discussing security, arrivals, preparations. What are they preparing for? I asked as we settled into the back seat. You. Damien's smile was wry. My family wants to meet the woman who captured me so completely I derailed a carefully arranged alliance. They're curious. Curious or hostile? Both, probably. My father doesn't like surprises. My mother will reserve judgment until she decides whether you're suitable. His hand found my knee, steady and reassuring. Just be yourself, the version you were last night. Confident, charming, clearly devoted to me. The drive up to the villa was deliberately slow, giving me time to absorb the grounds. Formal gardens, marble fountains, statuary that belonged in museums. Staff appeared as we approached, moving with practiced efficiency to handle luggage. Open doors generally demonstrate that this household ran like a well-oiled machine. And then there were the guards, discreet but unmistakable, positioned at strategic points, their jackets tailored to conceal weapons I knew were there. This wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. "Damien!" A woman appeared in the massive doorway, early 50s, elegant in the way Italian women seem to manage effortlessly, her sharp eyes assessing me in seconds. "Finally. We were beginning to think you'd invented this mysterious fiancé." "Mama." Damien kissed both her cheeks, then drew me forward. "This is Mila Theros. Mila, my mother, Francesca Ferrante." I extended my hand, but Francesca pulled me into an embrace instead, kissing both my cheeks in the European manner. Up close, I caught her scent, expensive perfume, subtle and classic. Her eyes, when she pulled back, were intelligent and probing. "So you're the girl who has my son breaking contracts and defying his father." Her English was perfect, barely accented. "You must be extraordinary." I started, but Damien's hand at my lower back stopped me. "She is," he said firmly. "Shall we go inside?" The drive was long. The interior of the villa was everything I'd expected and more. Frescoed ceilings, antique furniture, art that probably required its own insurance policy. Francesca led us through rooms that felt more like museum galleries than living spaces, finally arriving at a formal sitting room where a man waited. Salvatore Ferrante. I knew him from the weight of his presence before Damien made introductions. Tall like his son, but broader, with silver threading his dark hair and eyes that had seen things they wouldn't forget. He stood as we entered, and I felt his gaze strip away every pretense, every carefully constructed facade. "Papa," Damien said, his voice cooler than it had been with his mother. "This is Mila." "Miss Theros." Salvatore's handshake was firm, brief, calculated. "Welcome to our home. My son tells me you swept him off his feet in Santorini." The slight emphasis on "tells me" made clear what he thought of that story. I lifted my chin, channeling the confidence I didn't feel. "He's exaggerating. I think we swept each other off our feet." A slight smile curved Salvatore's lips. "Diplomatic. Good. You'll need that quality in this family." He gestured to the seating. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." What followed was the most intense interrogation disguised as polite conversation I'd ever experienced. Francesca asked about my family, my education, my interests, all delivered with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Salvatore focused on Villa Theros, asking pointed questions about revenue, occupancy, management structure, testing whether I actually knew my own business or was just a pretty face. Damien sat beside me, his hand never leaving my knee, occasionally interjecting to redirect particularly invasive questions. But mostly he let me handle it, watching to see if I could hold my own. I thought of the contract I'd signed, of what was at stake, and summoned every ounce of poise I possessed. I spoke knowledgeably about the hospitality industry, about maintaining family legacy while adapting to modern markets. I deflected personal questions with humor, gave just enough detail to seem authentic without revealing too much. "Your family has owned the property for how long?" Salvatore asked, leaning back with an expression I couldn't read. "3 generations. My great-grandfather built it from nothing. My parents expanded it before they died. Now it's mine to protect." I met his gaze steadily. "I understand the weight of legacy, Mr. Ferrante, how it shapes you, how it demands sacrifices. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth exactly, but perhaps respect. Indeed. And now you're joining a family with an even older legacy, one that comes with expectations and dangers. My son has explained this? He has. I glanced at Damien, seeing tension in his jaw. I'm not entering this blindly. Good. Salvatore stood, signaling the interview was over. Dinner is at 8. Francesca will show you to your room. He paused, looking at Damien. My study. Now. The command was clear. Damien squeezed my knee once before rising. I'll find you before dinner. And then I was alone with Francesca, who studied me with new intensity now that the men had left. Come, she said. I'll show you where you'll be staying. The guest suite was on the second floor, with windows overlooking the gardens and a bathroom larger than my entire apartment in Santorini. Francesca watched as I took it in, my reaction to opulence I wasn't accustomed to. You're nervous, she observed, not unkindly. Wouldn't you be? I'm meeting my fiancé's family for the first time. I turned to face her. And I get the sense I'm being evaluated for more than just my table manners. She smiled, genuine this time. You're perceptive. I like that. She moved to the window, gazing out at the grounds. My husband is concerned. Damien has never defied him this completely before. Breaking the DeSanto alliance creates complications. I didn't ask him to break anything. No. But you gave him a reason to want to. She turned back to me. Tell me truthfully, do you love my son? The question caught me off guard. I thought about lying, about giving the answer that would smooth things over. But something in Francesca's eyes demanded honesty. I don't know yet, I said carefully. We haven't known each other long enough for love. But there's something between us. Something real, even if I can't define it yet. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. That's the most honest answer you could have given. And honesty, Miss Theros, is currency in this family. Remember that. After she left, I sank onto the edge of the massive bed, trying to steady my breathing. The room felt too large, too formal, too much like a gilded cage I'd willingly entered. My phone buzzed. A text from Andreas checking in, making sure I'd arrived safely. I responded briefly, not trusting myself to say more. Damien found me an hour later, entering without knocking, his expression tight. That went better than expected. Did it? Your father looked like he wanted to run a background check. He probably already has. Damien crossed to the window, tension radiating from his shoulders. But you handled yourself well. My mother likes you, which is crucial. My father. He's reserving judgment. I moved to stand beside him, our reflections ghostly in the darkening glass. What did he say in the study? That I'm making a mistake. That personal desire has no place in family strategy. That the DeSanto alliance represents decades of careful planning I'm destroying for a woman I barely know. His jaw clenched. The usual. And what did you say? He turned to face me, his expression fierce. That some things are worth the risk. That I'm building my own legacy, not just maintaining his. That you... He stopped, seeming to reconsider. That this decision is mine to make. The intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. I reached up, tracing the line of tension in his jaw. This is harder than you expected. Being here, defying him. Yes. His hand covered mine, pressing it to his face. But not impossible, and not something I regret. He pulled me closer, until our bodies aligned. Do you regret it? I thought about Villa Theros, about the debt that would be cleared, about my uncle's relief when he learned the blackmail threat was gone, about the way Damien looked at me like I was the only thing in the world worth seeing. No. His kiss was different here, more urgent, more claiming, as though he needed to prove something to himself or to the house around us. I melted into it, into him, letting the heat between us chase away doubts and fears. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Dinner will be a production, more family arriving, formal settings, everyone watching to see if we're legitimate. His hands framed my face. Just stay close to me. Let me handle the difficult questions. I can handle myself. I know you can. But tonight, let me protect you. Please. The vulnerability in that request undid me. I nodded, and we stood there as darkness fell over Tuscany, holding each other while the weight of expectations and legacy pressed down from all sides. Dinner was exactly as promised. A production. Long table, formal settings, more Ferrantes than I could track. Damien's sisters with their husbands, cousins, associates whose exact relationship to the family remained deliberately vague, all watching me with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. I sat at Damien's right hand, his fingers occasionally finding mine beneath the table, steadying me through courses of food I was too nervous to fully taste. Conversation flowed in Italian, sometimes translated for my benefit, sometimes left deliberately opaque. I caught references to business deals, territory disputes, names mentioned with respect or contempt. "So tell us," one of Damien's cousins said, switching to English mid-conversation. "How exactly did you capture our Damien's attention? He's usually so focused on business." All eyes turned to me. Damien's hand tightened on mine, but I smiled, channeling every performance skill I'd developed working hospitality. "I think he captured mine first," I said smoothly. "He has this way of looking at you like you're the only person in the room. Hard to resist." Laughter around the table, knowing and warm. Francesca smiled approvingly. Even Salvatore's expression softened slightly. The evening stretched on, each course bringing new scrutiny, new tests I hadn't known I'd be taking. But gradually, I felt some tension ease. I wasn't accepted, not fully, but I wasn't rejected either. Later, back in my suite, I found Damien waiting. He'd loosened his tie, shed his jacket, and stood by the window looking out at stars I could barely see through light pollution from the villa. "You were perfect tonight," he said without turning. I was terrified. It didn't show. Now he did turn, and the look on his face made my heart stutter. "You fit, Mila, in ways I didn't expect, ways that make this more complicated." I crossed to him, drawn by invisible threads I couldn't name. Complicated how? Because this was supposed to be an arrangement, temporary, convenient. His hands settled on my hips, pulling me against him. "But nothing about wanting you feels temporary." "We have 6 months," I reminded him, even as my body betrayed me, molding to his. "That's what we agreed." 6 months, he repeated, his lips finding my neck. "Ask me again in 6 months if this still feels like an arrangement." I meant to protest, meant to maintain some distance, some protection against the inevitable heartbreak when our contract expired. But then his mouth found mine, and all my carefully constructed defenses crumbled like sandcastles against the tide. 3 weeks at the Ferrante Villa taught me more about Damien's world than any contract could have outlined. I learned that shipping interests meant controlling Mediterranean ports through a complex network of legitimate businesses fronting illegal operations. That import-export involved items that never appeared on official manifests. That Sunday dinners weren't just family gatherings, but strategy sessions where power was negotiated over pasta and wine. I learned to read the subtle signals. When to leave a room because business was about to be discussed. When my presence was required for appearances. When silence was the only safe response. Francesca became my unlikely guide, teaching me the unspoken rules of being a Ferrante woman. You don't ask direct questions, she explained one afternoon as we walked the gardens. You observe, listen, piece together truth from fragments, and you never, ever repeat what you hear. Even to Damien? She gave me a shrewd look, especially to Damien. He protects you by keeping certain things separate. Don't force him to choose between honesty and your safety. The warning unsettled me, but I understood it. The more I learned, the more I realized how dangerous knowledge could be in this world, how the wrong word to the wrong person could have deadly consequences. Villa Theros's debt disappeared exactly as promised. My uncle called, his voice thick with relief and confusion, explaining that an anonymous benefactor had cleared everything. He'd been ready to sell, he admitted, ready to give up rather than continue being bled dry by people who knew his secrets. What secrets? I'd asked, but he'd gone silent, changing the subject to resort operations and upcoming reservations. Damien found me on the terrace afterward, staring at my phone. Your uncle sounds better. He does, thanks to you. I turned to face him. What did you do to the people who were blackmailing him? I convinced them to find other sources of income. His tone made clear that conversation was closed. Your family's safe now. That's what matters. But I couldn't let it go. What were they blackmailing him with? What secret is worth destroying Villa Theros over? Damien was quiet for a long moment, weighing how much to reveal. Finally, your uncle made some poor choices 20 years ago, got involved with people who trafficked antiquities from archaeological sites. He thought he was just facilitating sales, didn't understand the full scope of what he was enabling. Ice slid through my veins. My uncle was involved in smuggling? As a very minor player, young, naive, quickly in over his head. He extracted himself, but they kept records. Proof that could destroy him if revealed. Damien's hand found my shoulder. I made those records disappear. Your uncle's secret is safe. I thought about Stavros, kind, anxious Stavros who'd raised me after my parents died, who'd worked himself to exhaustion keeping Villa Theros running. He never told me. Some burdens we carry alone. Damien pulled me against his chest, and I let him, needing the solid warmth. Don't judge him too harshly. We all have things in our past we'd rather keep buried. Even you? Especially me. His arms tightened. But you don't need to know those things, Mila. The less you know, the safer you are. But I was learning anyway, piecing together truth from overheard conversations and Francesca's careful lessons. I learned that Damien had taken control of family operations at 25 after his older brother died in circumstances no one would discuss, that Salvatore still technically headed the family but increasingly deferred to Damien's judgment, that the arranged marriage to Valentina De Santo was meant to heal a rift between families, a rift Damien's brother's death had created. You never told me that, I said one night as we lay tangled in his sheets, the villa quiet around us. That marrying Valentina was about making peace after your brother died. He went still. Who told you that? I pieced it together, from things people said, didn't say. I propped myself on one elbow, studying his profile in the darkness. Your brother was killed by the De Santos? Possibly, probably. We could never prove it. His voice was flat, emotionless in the way that meant he was feeling too much. Marco was reckless, arrogant, made enemies unnecessarily. When he died in a car accident that wasn't quite an accident, the De Santos were the obvious suspects. So, the arranged marriage was my father's way of ensuring we didn't go to war. Strategic alliance instead of blood feud. He turned to face me, his eyes dark in the dim light. I was supposed to marry the daughter of the family that probably killed my brother. That's the world I come from, Mila. That's what you've gotten yourself into. I should have been horrified, should have recognized the danger, the moral bankruptcy of a world where marriage was currency and murder went unpunished. Instead, I felt overwhelming sadness for the boy Damien must have been. 25 years old, grieving his brother, forced to assume control and make impossible choices. "I'm sorry," I whispered, kissing his jaw, his cheek, his mouth. "I'm sorry that was asked of you." His response was fierce, claiming, pulling me beneath him with an urgency that had nothing to do with desire and everything to do with needing to forget. I gave him that oblivion, that brief escape from legacy and duty and impossible choices. Afterward, as our breathing steadied and reality crept back, he traced patterns on my bare shoulder. "Valentina's father requested a meeting. Tomorrow. He wants to understand why I'm breaking our arrangement." Tension coiled in my stomach. "Is that dangerous?" "Potentially. He's angry, feels disrespected." Damien's voice was thoughtful. "I need you there. Need him to see that this isn't a casual decision, that you're worth breaking alliances over." "What if I'm not?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "What if 6 months from now, when this arrangement ends, you regret choosing me over peace with the DeSantos?" He rolled to face me fully, his expression fierce. "You really think this is still just an arrangement? Isn't it? We signed a contract. 6 months, then we're done." That contract was insurance, a way to give us both an exit if this didn't work. His hand cradled my face with devastating tenderness. "But it's working, Mila. Better than I expected, better than I deserve, and I'm starting to think 6 months won't be nearly enough." My heart stuttered. "Damien. I know, too soon, too fast, too complicated. But I can't keep pretending this is temporary when everything in me wants to make it permanent." His thumb traced my lower lip. "Can you honestly say you don't feel the same?" I couldn't. We both knew I couldn't. What had started as a business arrangement had transformed into something real, something terrifying in its intensity. I was falling for Damien Ferrante, not the Mafia prince, but the man beneath. The one who held me at night, who listened when I talked about Villa Theros, who looked at me like I was worth fighting for. "I feel it," I admitted. "But that doesn't change the reality of what happens when this arrangement ends. When I go back to Santorini and you stay here and marry someone my father chose?" He shook his head. "That's not happening. Not anymore. You've ruined me for convenient alliances, Mila Theros." The meeting with Antonio DeSanto took place in a private room at an exclusive restaurant in Florence. Damien brought me, along with his father and 2 bodyguards who waited discreetly near the entrance. I wore another designer dress, this one deep burgundy, with Damien's hand possessive at my lower back as we entered. DeSanto was older than Salvatore, with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. His daughter Valentina sat beside him, beautiful in a practiced way, her expression carefully neutral as she assessed me. The woman I'd displaced without ever meeting. "Damien." DeSanto's greeting was formal, cold. "And this must be the reason for your sudden change of heart." "Mila Theros," Damien introduced me, his voice carrying an edge of warning. "My fiancé." I extended my hand, which DeSanto took briefly, perfunctorily. Valentina didn't offer hers at all, just continued her silent assessment. We sat, ordered food no one would eat, engaged in the elaborate dance of polite conversation, masking hostility. DeSanto asked questions designed to expose me as unsuitable, about my family, my business, my understanding of what marrying a Ferrante entailed. "I understand enough," I said when he pressed particularly hard. "I understand that power comes with costs. That family means sacrifice. That the world Damien inhabits is dangerous." I met his gaze steadily. "But I also understand that some things are worth the risk." "Love?" Valentina spoke for the first time, her voice carrying subtle mockery. How romantic. How naive. Not love yet, I corrected, but possibility, potential, something real rather than something arranged. I glanced at her, seeing calculation in her eyes rather than heartbreak. I'm sorry if that disappoints you, but I can't apologize for being chosen when you were assigned. Silence fell over the table. Damien's hand found my knee under the table, squeezing once. Approval or warning, I couldn't tell. Salvatore looked almost amused. DeSanto's expression had gone carefully blank. You have spirit, he finally said. I'll give you that. But spirit doesn't protect you from consequences, Miss Theros. Breaking alliances creates enemies. I'm aware. I kept my voice steady, despite the threat underlying his words. But I'm here anyway. That should tell you something about my commitment. What followed was tense negotiation between Salvatore and DeSanto, with Damien occasionally interjecting about how to handle the broken arrangement. Financial compensation was discussed, alternative alliances proposed, face-saving measures outlined. Through it all, I sat silent, letting the men conduct their business while Valentina studied me with eyes that promised this wasn't over. When we finally left, Damien's tension was palpable. He said nothing during the drive back to the villa, his jaw tight, one hand clenched in a fist on his thigh. Did I make it worse? I finally asked. No. He turned to me, expression softening. You were perfect. Strong without being disrespectful. DeSanto expected you to cower, to be easily dismissed. Instead, you held your ground. Pride colored his voice. You're more than I deserve, Mila Theros. That night, lying in his arms, I let myself imagine a future beyond 6 months. Waking up beside Damien in this villa, learning to navigate his world, maybe even finding my place in it. It was dangerous to hope, dangerous to want something that might not be mine to keep. But I was learning that in Damien's world, danger was currency. And I was willing to pay the price. The call came at 3 a.m, 2 months into our arrangement. I woke to Damien's phone buzzing urgently, his tense voice speaking rapid Italian in the darkness. When he ended the call, his face was grim in the light from the screen. What's wrong? I asked, fear already coiling in my stomach. Someone torched one of our restaurants in Naples. His voice was flat, controlled in the way that meant he was furious. No casualties, but the message is clear. Message from who? The DeSantos. This is their response to our broken arrangement. He was already out of bed, pulling on clothes with efficient movements. I need to go handle this. You stay here. No. I sat up, pulling the sheet around me. If this is because of me, You should stay safe. His voice was steel. This isn't your world, Mila. Don't make me worry about you while I'm dealing with them. But I'd spent 2 months learning to read him, to understand what he wasn't saying. The tension in his shoulders wasn't just about the restaurant. It was about me, about the danger I represented simply by existing in his life. I found Francesca in the kitchen an hour later, unable to sleep. She looked up from her espresso, unsurprised to see me. He told you to stay here, she said. Not a question. He did. But you're thinking about following anyway. A slight smile. You're more like a Ferrante woman than you realize. I poured my own coffee, joining her at the marble counter. What would you do? If it were Salvatore? I'd stay, let him handle business while I handled everything else. But I've had 30 years to learn that lesson. Her gaze was shrewd. You're still new to this world, still thinking you can change it, save him from it. Can I? No. The word was gentle but absolute. The only thing you can do is decide if you love him enough to live in it beside him. The word love hung between us, undeniable now. I did love Damien. Had been falling since that first night at the pool. Had probably been lost since the moment he'd looked at me like I was worth fighting for. I do, I whispered. God help me. I do. Francesca reached across the counter, covering my hand. Then you need to understand what that means. The danger. The secrets. The things he'll do to protect you that you won't want to know about. What things? The restaurant burning? That won't go unanswered. Someone will pay. Maybe with their business, maybe with more. Her eyes were serious. This is who we are, Mila. This is what we do. Can you live with that? I thought about Villa Theros, about the legitimate business I'd been raised in, about the clean lines between right and wrong I'd always believed in. Then I thought about Damien's hands on my skin, his voice saying my name like a prayer, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching, like I was precious and dangerous at once. Yes, I said. I can. 2 days later, news broke that a DeSanto warehouse had suffered accidental damage from a gas leak. No injuries, but significant financial loss. Damien returned home that evening, exhaustion etched in every line of his body. I met him at the door, and he pulled me into his arms without a word, just holding me like I was the only solid thing in a chaotic world. I felt him breathe me in, felt some of his tension ease. Come on, I said softly. I'll run you a bath. Later, as he soaked in the enormous tub, I perched on the edge and listened as he talked about things he probably shouldn't tell me. The negotiations with DeSanto, the careful escalation designed to send messages without starting a war, the delicate balance between showing strength and avoiding mutually destructive conflict. This is what our life would be, he said, catching my hand and pressing it to his lips. Constant maneuvering, constant threats. Is that really what you want? I want you. I leaned forward, kissing him softly. The rest, I'll learn to handle. Something shifted in his expression, relief mixed with determination. The 6 months are almost up. We should talk about what happens after. My heart stuttered. What do you want to happen? I want to tear up that contract. I want to make this real, not an arrangement, but a real engagement leading to a real marriage. His voice dropped. I want you to be mine, Mila. Not temporarily, not conditionally. Mine. I should have hesitated, should have considered carefully, rationally. Instead, I found myself nodding, tears spilling down my cheeks. Yes, I want that too. He pulled me into the tub, dress and all, kissing me with a desperation that spoke of fear and relief, and promises he'd make good on. We made love surrounded by water and candlelight, sealing our choice with bodies and breath, and words neither of us could take back. The next morning, Damien called his father and DeSanto to a formal meeting. I insisted on attending, despite his objections. This concerns me too, I argued. I should be there. It could be dangerous. If DeSanto decides to make a statement, then I'll be right beside you when he does. I lifted my chin, using the stubbornness he claimed to find both frustrating and endearing. We're partners now, real partners. That means I don't hide while you handle the dangerous parts. His smile was equal parts proud and exasperated. You're going to make my life very complicated, aren't you? Count on it. The meeting took place in neutral territory, a lawyer's office in Rome. DeSanto arrived with Valentina and 2 bodyguards. We brought Salvatore and our own security. The room crackled with tension as everyone took their seats. I assume this is about your ongoing campaign of property damage, DeSanto said without preamble. I prefer to think of it as evening the score. Damien's voice was cool. You burned my restaurant. I responded proportionally. Because I lost a bride, DeSanto shot back. A carefully negotiated alliance you discarded for... His gaze flicked to me dismissively. For whatever this is. This, Damien said, his hand finding mine on the table, is my choice, my future, and I'm here to make it official. He produced a document, a formal dissolution of the arranged marriage contract, with financial compensation far exceeding what was owed. DeSanto read it slowly, his expression unreadable. You're buying your way out, he observed. I'm settling our obligation honorably, protecting both families from further conflict. Damien's voice was steady. I know what this alliance meant. I know what it cost to arrange. This compensation reflects that. Salvatore leaned forward. We're also proposing an alternative arrangement, a trade agreement that benefits both our operations without requiring a marriage alliance. Economics over biology. What followed was complex negotiation I only partially followed. Shipping routes, port access, percentage splits on various ventures. Gradually, I saw DeSanto's resistance soften. The money helped, but the alternative alliance was what sealed it. Finally, after hours of discussion, DeSanto signed the dissolution papers. You're making a mistake, he said to Damien. Choosing passion over strategy never ends well. Perhaps. Damien's thumb stroked my hand. But some mistakes are worth making. As we left the building, relief made me lightheaded. It was done. The arrangement was dissolved, the DeSantos compensated, peace maintained, and Damien and I were free to build something real. 6 months after our arrangement began, we stood on the terrace of the Ferrante villa and burned the contract. Damien held the papers over a metal bowl while I struck the match, watching as our carefully negotiated terms went up in flames. No going back now, he said, echoing his words from that first night. No going back, I agreed. He pulled a ring from his pocket, not the one from our fake engagement, but something new. A sapphire surrounded by diamonds, the blue exactly matching the Aegean waters where we'd met. Mila Theros, will you marry me? Not because of a contract, not to solve my problems, but because I love you, and I want to spend my life making you as happy as you've made me. Yes. The word came easily now, no hesitation, no doubt. Yes, I'll marry you. Our wedding took place a year later, back in Santorini at Villa Theros. Damien had invested in expanding the property, turning it into a luxury boutique resort that was now the crown jewel of a small Mediterranean hotel empire we owned together. My family legacy secured, combined with his resources and vision. The ceremony was small, just family and close friends. Francesca cried, Salvatore smiled, and my uncle Stavros walked me down the aisle with tears of joy and relief. The DeSantos sent a perfunctory gift, acknowledgement that peace had been maintained. As Damien and I exchanged vows overlooking the caldera, I thought about that first night when I'd teased him with provocative looks, thinking he was just another wealthy tourist. How wrong I'd been, how right it had turned out to be. I love you, he whispered as he slid the ring on my finger. My fierce, stubborn, perfect wife. I love you too, I whispered back. My dangerous, protective, impossible husband. The celebration lasted into the night, dancing and laughter and champagne flowing freely. But my favorite moment came later, when Damien and I slipped away to the private pool where it had all begun. Remember this place? He asked, pulling me into the water fully clothed, just like that first night. How could I forget? I wrapped my legs around his waist, letting him hold me suspended in the warm water. This is where you warned me about provoking you. And you did it anyway. His smile was wicked and tender at once. Best decision I never wanted you to make. We stayed there until dawn, making promises and plans and love in the place where our story began. No longer an arrangement, no longer temporary. Just us, real, permanent, and worth every risk we'd taken to get here.